jumping from what we've heard this morning, which has been delicious and extraordinary. I want to say thank you to the committee that pulled all of the folks together and to all of the presenters that are here today. There's a tremendous amount of wisdom that's been brought to the table. One of our challenges across the community is that we're not being heard effectively. And so part of what we have tried to do here in the US is to improve the respectability, shall I say, of various forms of healing work. And specifically within the energy medicine community, we're trying to move things forward. We're using a paradigm that everything is frequency. We live in a giant ocean of frequency. So the phytomedicine that is happening is frequency application to physical tissue structure. The music therapy is direct frequency application to physical tissue structure. The energy work is, again, frequency application to physical tissue structure. And when you look at photobiomodulation, which is frequency application, much more specifically through methodology, sometimes external, sometimes internal, you're looking at fundamental tissue manipulation at the most vulnerable and most specific levels. To exempt techniques, to eliminate techniques which are viable from that point of view, it's actually kind of critical to instead assess those techniques and utilize them. When you exempt them, you lose the wisdom, and that is not effective in the complexity of both our world and our world's problems. Wow. In 2003, we began a process of development at some initial meetings at the International Society of the Study for Subtle Energy and Energy Medicine, that developing some sort of an empirical test to look at energy practitioners and make the determination, are they real or not? It's a fundamental question. And we developed the first test elements by 2004. We continued development of basic testing in that period, presented over a period of actually most of 14 years. And in 2010, we actually met with representatives of the US government, Professor Sally Ann Payton, who was a professor at the time at University of Michigan. She's a very, very fine attorney and a wisdom keeper. And she came to ISOM and discussed the need for integrating and evaluating and developing criteria so that licensure could proceed on energy practices, and that could be one of the first steps. We have acupuncture licensed in this country, but in many states we don't have herbal medicine, and those that practice herbal medicine licensed in this country. Naturopathy only has very limited licensure in this country. So we're missing, and we have tremendous holes in wisdom that could be provided to the community. We did a follow-up meeting in 2011 where Dr. Professor Payton came back and said, okay, are you guys ready to move forward? And everyone kind of gasped, and because working with energy practitioners is a little bit like herding cats. It's not very easy to do, very independent thinkers. And tried to move forward and hadn't made a lot of progress. So we actually worked on it slowly and gently. And then we got another request, and this is moving from a democratic presidential administration to a Republican presidential administration, and then supported again by another Democratic presidential information and system. So we were having bipartisan support to move forward with the energy practice community. And as a result, we ended up doing a series of meetings, which began in 2018. We bought 40 of the largest energy healing training programs, and this was across the various dimensions of the energy healing community, which is extremely diverse. For example, there are over 7,000 versions of Qigong and Tai Chi that are practiced here in the US. So it's a very diverse community, and that's just one section of the energy practices community. We did a series of these meetings at Arizona State University. We had, in addition to the energy healing community, we also had scientists who were actively doing research in this area. And each group met for 2 to 3 days. The end result of those meetings was a series of 14 working groups. We developed 2 national organizations. We actually have a third that we hope will develop over time and will be added to the Board of Education as one of the higher education boards. There's a Board of Education for nursing. There's a Board of Education for physicians. We would like to see a Board of Education for energy practices, but that's in the future. The 2 organizations which were developed were the National Alliance of Energy Practitioners and then the National Certification Center of Energy Practitioners. At that point, we brought together a number of different factors. The first is there had never been a cohesive and full literature review of everything that was out there. And so we now have a bibliography of over 15,000 peer-reviewed journal articles in support of the energy practices from around the world. And that we've only gotten about a quarter of what's actually out there. Now, I want to qualify this. We pulled everything, good, bad, indifferent. And frankly, the quality of research on the energy practices, I think, is extremely poor in general. It is becoming better. I'm impressed with the improvements that we're seeing around the world, but historically, the process has been very, very poor. Next, we developed a research training program for clinicians, which is free and available to people practicing energy practices on a daily basis from a clinical aspect, so that they could start to provide clinical case studies. Again, that was a major hole in the literature. We have research mentoring, which was developed from a marvelous group of scientists. We developed a Human Studies Ethics Review Board. We have a journal, and in fact, the journal is one of the sponsors of this conference, and I'd like to invite those of you that are presenting to submit to the journal. We are open access. We are extremely low priced. If you have an economic issue, we are happy to talk with you about alternatives. Perhaps you can write a series of articles in exchange. And it allows people to see your information without having to go to a university process. We are a peer-reviewed journal. We are in the process of getting listed on various databases, but we are open access and can be Googled in the meantime. If we go to the certification center, we actually brought together people from all over the country in all of the various groupings, developed 11 discrete divisions, and we would like to invite groups that have more than 3 similar types and styles of practices to develop a division so that we're not limiting things. We involved over 100 people. It was actually closer to 200. That we had various segments of the community, did a series of online meetings. We developed ethical standards that are in common For all of the 11 divisions, we developed standards of practice, which are in common for all of the 11 divisions, and we have online exams available in both areas. We've also developed legal definitions for all of the division groups. Each of the division groups developed overarching curriculum information and national certification standards for each group. So we have taken what was raw community and begin to put underneath them the professionalism which is necessary to move forward in a society that requires that. Other societies do not necessarily require that. But in the US, in order to be seen as a professional, one of the things that helps is licensure. It improves the assessment of integrity of the work. So we also have provided some of the litigious societies of the U.S. requirements, things like liability insurance, options for anatomy and physiology training, options for those that cannot physically get to empirical test sites because the country is large, to have availability still to move forward for national certification. So the National Certification Center of Energy Practices is the official trade board in the US for practitioners. The division list actually has been interesting because we ran into verbiage, wordplay that was restricted within the US. So that rather than saying it was medical intuition, we're saying it's clinical intuition. Rather than saying it's medical Qigong, it is clinical Qigong. That is because the word medical in the US is restricted. Now, it's not necessarily the case in other countries. So you have options in other countries that we don't have here. And we wanted to create a pathway for individuals who had a spiritually diverse opening process to the energy work. So we actually created a natural practitioner's pathway where they're mentored through the process rather than having a more structured pathway. You know, Qigong has been available for a long time. Shamanism has been available that can be tracked for over 60,000 years. And we have some of the newer energy techniques. For example, cognitive somatic energy healing is the lay version of energy psychology, which is newer in that it incorporates more current psychological techniques with wisdom, which is long-term, into a holistic whole. So we have a broad range of techniques and processes that are available and support. The division definitions are both on the website. There's also journal articles that are available. We've tried to concentrate most of the material in the IJHC journal so it was easy to find for people, but they're also out in the bibliographic information that's on the Alliance website. So at this point, we've got a whole series of publications because we found that you had to have the research support, which all of you are supporting, in addition to the legal support. And there had to be research evaluations of the structural support that also went on. So that was extremely important. For those of you where I'm moving too fast to write down the information on the publications, feel free to email me. You can, it's Melinda _Connor, CONNOR, at mindspring.com, and I'll put it up in the chat at the end of the talk. And I'm happy to send you a copy of these slides. I would ask that you not present the material that you're not acquainted with. Instead, use this as wisdom for your own personal work instead. So, series of publications. Among those were the publicized division definitions. Legal definitions are different from scientific definitions, and there need to be both aspects available within the community, particularly if you're moving forward to develop a level of professionalism within the community. That becomes extremely important. Herbal medicine is a tradition in every country around the world and has rarely been given the credit or appropriate credentials that it should receive. It is rarely a licensed profession. It is rather an accepted component. And I'd like to challenge that thinking that being an accepted component is sufficient. I think asking for respect and then not demanding it is a mistake. So published division definitions are extremely important in terms of defining the limitations of the form, where are the boundaries around each particular grouping, distinguishing each particular grouping, and then defining a scope of practice. How is energy practices different from sound therapy and or music therapy, because the two are different? How is photobiomodulation utilizing, for example, an herbal treatment of green tea to create a systematic change of frequency, which changes inflammatory response? How are they uniquely different, and how is the scope of practice of each of the practitioners of these elements uniquely different? It's extremely important to define things in this way so that we're looking at clarity and crispness when we're looking at the science. We have sample legislation, which is available to anyone from any country, which you can download. It is on the Certification Center website, and it includes the definitions, competency standards, training standards, a process of licensing, physical environmental standards, and various other kinds of issues. The sampling is available at www.nccoep.org, and it is Essentials tab and then State for Energy Practitioners, and you'll be in good shape. You can get the information. Okay, any questions?